Good morning, everyone. Students, you must be knowing that we people have a mixed economy in our country. You must have studied in your economics class also. We have mixed economy in our country. That means private sector as well as public sector is allowed to operate in our country. Initially this private sector was playing a complementary role to the public sector, means the main role was of the public sector and the private sector was playing side role. Fine, but so many changes has taken place in the industrial policies after independence, and amendments have taken place, and gradually government realized that if we want to remove the drawbacks of the public sector, we have to give freedom to the private sector. So privatization has taken place, and after so many amendments and changes, finally one new policy has introduced by the government, or economic policy has been introduced. This was New Economic Policy 1991, where a lot of liberty is given to the private sector. So these three terms has been introduced, three major components or elements you can say of the new economic policy. These components were LPG. It was not liquefied petroleum gas. This was liberalization, privatization and globalization. LPG. This term is given LPG, right? Now these are interrelated. First point is your liberalization. As its meaning is suggesting, liberalization means liberty dena, chhoot dena. Okay. So here the government has given liberty to the private sector in so many things, like while doing the business, export, import, licensing policy, and so many rule regulations and rigidity were there. So they have lifted these kind of rigidity from the, so this has become easy for the people to do business, right? A kind of liberty is given to the people. So many people, they just come forward and they have started doing their business. So that was the initial step from the government side. They have liberalized the things. So let's see where they have given the liberty. This was abolition of license except a few. At few places, of course, licensing policy is still available, but the area where it was not required, so they have lifted this licensing policy. Next one, no restriction on expansion or construction of the business activity. If somebody want to expand their business, easily they can do, and if they want to contract their business, they can do. So no such big formalities. Okay. Next is reduction of tax rate and lifting of unnecessary control over the economy. Where there is an excess control of the government, people, they get hesitant to do the work, right? And certain restrictions are there in some area. So government has reduced the tax and unnecessary restriction they have removed from there, and unnecessary control they have lifted. So that has given a sort of motivation to the people to come forward in this area. Next we have liberalization in import and export. This has liberalized. Liberalized means easiness. Unnecessary formalities government has removed from the export and import business. Fine. So that has become easy for the people to do. Next we have easy and simplifying in procedure to attract foreign capital in India. Well, apart from this import and export, where we invite the foreign capital, again I tell you, so many formalities, restrictions were there. So government has done this procedure very easy and simplified. So more and more people from foreign, they attracted and they have invested their capital in our country. Okay. Now, freedom in movement of goods and services. Freely the goods were, there was a freedom in moving the goods from one place to another one. Not only in the country, even outside of the country, means export and import, you can say. Next is freedom in fixing the prices of goods and services. Once there was a time, people, those who were manufacturing the goods, they were not free to decide the prices of their product. Now, a kind of freedom is provided to those one. So that has become more convenient for the people. So these all points we have considered in liberalization, means the liberty in one or another field, government has given the liberty to the people. Fine. Next we have, through the liberalization, privatization has taken place, and this is telling privatization refers to giving greater role to private sector and reducing the role of the public sector. Means they have given the major work to the private sector and the role of the public sector has been reduced there. To execute policy of privatization, government took the following steps. So what steps are taken by the government? The first one, disinvestment of public sector, means transfer of public sector enterprises to the private sector. Disinvestment, once there was a time most of the fund was invested in the public sector by the government. Now disinvestment from there. Government is not investing much. Okay, it has moved towards private sector. Next one is setting up Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstitution. This board was set up to revive or close sick units in public sector enterprises suffering losses. Students, so many public units were there, public sector, in the public sector, public units were there which were not giving the profit, right? Not to speak of the profit, even continuous losses it was giving. So that is better to close these units. Fine. So, or I mean, we call these kind of industry as, we declare them as a sick industry, which are not giving the profits, even they are providing the losses year after year. So that's better to close them or to revive them. Fine. So they have, I mean, the government has set it up the board for these kind of industries. Okay. Next one is dilution of stake of the government. If in the process of disinvestment private sector acquires more than 51% shares, then it results in transfer of the ownership and management to the private sector. Once we have studied in 11th standard, students, subsidiary and holding company, where the government company is holding 51% share of the private company, so that private company is also considered as government company, and vice versa. Now if any private company is holding the 51% of the public sector, so that is also considered as the private. Okay, because private company is holding the share of that company, so that is also one of the step towards the privatization. Okay, now through the liberalization and privatization, this globalization has taken place. When the reign has come in the hand of the private people, so they started growing, and not only in the country, even on the international basis they have started doing the business, because they were free, and as some restrictions have been lifted and liberty has given in the license and all, export and import business has been relaxed by the government, so that has introduced to the new term, that is globalization. Okay, now it refers to integration of various economies of world. Till 1991, Indian government was following strict policy in regard of the import and foreign investment, in regard to licensing of imports, tariff and restrictions, etc. But after new policy, government adopted policy of globalization by taking following measures. We have discussed all these points, students. Fine. Now what it's telling, import liberalization. We have discussed in the previous point, export and import has been liberalized. Liberty is given. So government reduced many restrictions from import of capital goods, not only the consumer goods, even capital goods. They have restricted the ban from the import of the capital goods. Now easily you can purchase from there. Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, FARA, and that has been replaced by Foreign Exchange Management Act, and some benefits are provided to the people. Some easy rules has been provided in this act. Next one is rationalization of tariff structure, better for the consumers and for the private businessmen. Abolition of export duty, we have already discussed, means they have emphasized the export, they have promoted the export. If somebody is doing the export business, even government is promoting them, reducing the tax rates and providing so many kind of financial help and other kind of help. Okay. Next one is reduction of import duty. If you are purchasing something from another country, that is called import. So they have reduced the import duty also. So you are free to buy. So these two things have, increased this globalization factor. So as a result of globalization, physical boundaries and political boundaries remained no barrier for business enterprises. Whole world become a global village. And it's quite clear when any private businessman is free to do business. I mean, they can do the business anywhere from where they get more and more profits. Fine. So this liberalization, then privatization and globalization has taken place, and these three were the major reforms in the new industrial policy 1991. Right, students? So here we have completed this, and tomorrow we will discuss next topic. Thank you so much.